Welcome to the Retail Media Moguls podcast, brought to you by Platform 195. We share trends and strategies across retail media to help you accelerate your brand growth. I'm your host, Stuart Adamson. Welcome to the Retail Media Moguls podcast. I'm your host, Stuart Adamson, founder and CEO of Platform 195. Today, we're joined by the retail media and data leader at Ocado Retail, Jack Johnson. Jack is a commercial leader able to rally people behind his passion and skill for data and retail media. And with his experience working with some of the biggest names in retail, Ocado and Tesco, for example, it's easy to see why his unique overview of the retail industry makes him a guiding light for companies when they need to evolve, maintain, or revolutionize their media strategy. Jack, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Stuart. And I promise I didn't feed you any of that intro, so appreciate it.
Listen, tell us a bit about your journey, because obviously you've got Ocado now, but you've also had Tesco and dunnhumby in there. How did you get involved in this retail media space?
Yeah, so I think I sort of fell into it a little bit by accident. So my background, I guess, it started at university, and a lot of my friends went off to do sort of years in industry, and I wasn't actually originally planning to do that. So 2 years into uni, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go and learn how to do a job for a year. And I fell into what was then Symphony IRI, which very quickly rebranded to IRI. Very data, very insight led, using market data, account management, working with some really, really big, FMCGs and learning about how they work with retailers. So that was my first and that was completely by accident, right? Like fell into working for IRI. Finished off my studies, briefly went back there, and then this fantastic opportunity came up at a company in West London called dunnhumby, which I didn't know a huge amount about, right? I knew they pioneered a lot of stuff within loyalty and club card, and they were a data science company, but it was fantastic to sort of cut my teeth on how sort of FMCG industry works, how retailers work with what is the biggest retailer in the UK. So I did loads of roles, mainly commercial insight roles. So using customer data science to inform, customer first category management. And always had sort of an arm's length relationship with what was retail media back then, which was, couponing, a lot of in-store. Digital retail media wasn't necessarily really a thing. I think a lot of the work that was done in that space was test and learns, right? A lot of retailers didn't really know what to do with their on-site and off-site opportunities, and FMCGs were more interested in optimizing their trade marketing spend, whether that's through in-store activation or the like. So my background was always in data and insight, and I always had a fascination with how people shopped grocery, right? Like I think it's a great area to learn, how data and the richness of data that grocery does give you to inform strategy. And I worked with suppliers. I worked directly with Tesco. I did a load of sort of management and leadership roles within dunnhumby. Did that for about 7 years. And was desperate to work for a retailer, to be honest, because you were always, especially with dunnhumby and there, for all the value that dunnhumby delivered to Tesco, you're always sort of one step removed from actually the decision and the impact you can have on customers. So I was desperate to come and work for a retailer, and the opportunity at Ocado came to look after their data platform that suppliers accessed. So a really cross-functional role, working across stuff like customer success, product, sales, etc., and working really closely with suppliers. And about 12-18 months ago, I was asked to, have an extended remit across retail media as well, which is where the space is evolving really quickly, and there was a big opportunity to take the lead on what that looks like for Ocado. That's been my background, but background has totally been from an insight and data perspective, and I think now going into the retail media world where those two areas of the industry are really converging, right? The use of data and insight within the media space is a very, very different space now than it was sort of 5 years ago, and I think that's been really exciting to learn.
Totally. And are you seeing that at Ocado? Are you getting pressure from the brands for more and more insight, from what's going on?
Yeah, I think to understand what brands are asking, you really have to understand how digital retail media has evolved. And I think I touched upon it just then, but historically it was always a test and learn function within a retailer or an RMN, as they're now called, or even within brands and suppliers. I mean, historically, there weren't really e-commerce teams within FMCGs. So what you found, especially in the last 3 or 4 years, with the invent of a lot of ad tech getting into the industry, you've got the sophistication of retailers and brands in this space, is that they are asking for a lot of data and insight on their a lot of the on and off site activation that happens. I think it's all coming from a great space, right? We want to be optimizing and growing sales within the retailer, but with that comes a real sort of seismic change in the expectations of that data and insight that a retailer has to share. And I think we're fully behind that journey, and we want to be there in partnership with our brands and media agencies. But that is a big shift that's occurred in quite a small amount of time.
Short space of time, definitely. So tell me a bit about Ocado then, and where they are on their journey. Are they still at the beginning, or are they sort of quite mature now? How's it going?
It's an interesting question, just because I think we're always thinking, especially in our team, who we look after our retail media network and what our future proposition is going to look like. We're constantly thinking about where have we been, right? Like, how has this all evolved? And I think speaking to people that have been around the business for a long time, it's really clear that Ocado were one of the first in the UK to be doing digital retail media, right? We were doing featured products, we were doing display advertising, coupons. We had a really rich toolkit of activation that we offered to suppliers for a long time, right? 20 plus years. I do make the claim that we were doing advertising before Amazon. I'm not sure if that's true, but I'll keep saying until I'm told off. But we've got a really rich heritage of it, and it's been primarily around how do we optimize trade, right? Trade marketing budgets going into some big opportunities that we have, whether that's boosting visibility on site, whether that's getting creatives on site as well through display. So I think that's always been there, right? That's always been the heritage of Ocado, and suppliers have loved working with us for such a long time, because quite frankly, we were miles ahead sort of 5-10 years ago. There was no one else doing it the way we did it. But I think the way that I would sort of characterize the shift that's occurred is that a lot of our competition have modernized and changed the way they do retail media, and we've been caught a little bit still operating the way that we always have. And I think it's not to belittle what opportunities there are to advertise on Ocado.com and the relationships we have with our suppliers, but there's a mismatch between what suppliers now expect and some of the more fundamental things that we do as a retailer. So there's some exciting changes we want to get to.
Give us an example of those sort of areas of that where you feel you might be slightly behind and now you're sort of really focusing on to catch up.
Yeah, I mean, data sharing is a prime example, right? I think it's something that me and the team have been working really, really closely on, and we started to now share more data, especially in relation to stuff like click-through rates on featured products. We have really expanded the amount of retail data points that we have within our retail data platform that suppliers can access. And we've been making loads of progress there, but we've made one step in a much longer journey. And I'm not sure if you've been aware of the work that OMG have done with ISBA, and they've published the Responsible Retail Media Framework, which gives a little bit of a sort of now, next, future framework on what media data points we should, as a retailer, should be sharing. And that's been a really useful guide to help sense check our plans on what data provision we want to open up in the future. But with data, I think we look at it through two lenses. There's the what, which is the measures, but there's also the how, right? And I think that's where there's a big difference for some of our sophisticated brands versus maybe some of our smaller brands, is that actually we've got suppliers and brand advertisers asking for much broader, much more data provision and a lot more flexibility, whether that's open APIs or direct access to some of our data, whereas maybe smaller, less sophisticated suppliers just need it in a very, very simple format to help to drive decision making. So yeah, there's a few things in there, but yeah, that's a journey that we're on when it comes to data passback.
And have you opened up those APIs for the bigger partners, or is it still on the roadmap?
Not yet, and I think this is something that's in that retail media framework, is that it's very much a future aspiration. of what we need to get to. And I would also challenge whether it is the right thing to do, right? Like, we're all drowning in data. Data should have a purpose to drive to drive an outcome. And, it might well be that opening up data is the right thing to do in that sense. But also there are some really sort of easy gains we can do by just surfacing the right data at the right time. And that's something we're really trying to problem solve within our team.
Yeah, very good. So when you're at Tesco, Dunnhumby, and you were looking at Tesco, how much did that, insight start? Did you see that evolve as it started to come into the way Tesco was doing its retail media activity?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think we had a lot of, I was at the brunt of a lot of conversation with suppliers asking for stuff like evaluations, and they would all have a different point of view on how an evaluation should look and feel, and the methodologies that fed into evaluations. And I think there was always that expectation, but it was primarily in an in-store environment. I don't think there was that expectation necessarily around data passed back in a digital sense, but that's where we have seen the big shift. And I think Ocado being online only, we're the biggest online only grocer in the world, right? So we are, feeling this pressure of a shift in expectations of data pass back. That I think other RMNs, other retail media networks will have similar shifts, but they've already experienced that within the in-store world. And I think that's an interesting sort of angle to look at it by. But yeah, no, the ask has always been there. I think it's just becoming more suppliers are asking for it, and maybe the maturity of those asks are changing as well.
Yeah. And what about technology then? Let's talk about, because obviously that goes hand in hand with being able to capture data. What's been the technology journey for Ocado?
Yeah, I think we've been an online grocer obviously for the last 20 years, and one of the challenges that we have is just getting the data all into one place before we can even just getting to a position where you can share that data in the right way and the right format. We have a job internally, which I think a lot of suppliers won't, and advertisers that we work with won't necessarily see, is that actually a lot of this data can sometimes be a bit disparate, right? It's in different places of the business. And, I think that's something that we do behind the scenes, right? It's just making sure we're consolidating all the right data into the right, frameworks, and using the right technology partners to make sure that we can surface the right data and that we have faith in it as well, right? And I think that's a really important part of it. And I think, that's one of the impacts of trading an online business for 20 plus years, is that, you get a lot of fragmentation of where data sits. So we've done a big piece of work, and we will continue to do a big piece of work on making sure the data is structured in the right way, so that as and when we make calls on how and when to share things, it's all there ready for us to do it. So that's an ongoing piece of work, but shows how, I guess, how important it is, and how close we need to work with like central data and insights team within the retailer as well.
Yeah. And other brands using that data for, is it literally you servicing sort of campaign results and product sales and things like that, or is it feeding into the planning process? Yeah,
and I think you've struck on a really important point there, which is where's data used. So whether it's the planning, the execution, or the measurement of media, and I think we have traditionally surfaced a lot of behavioural data to help with the planning of media. So whether that's where are customers adding products to basket, where should you be thinking about visibility, where should you be thinking about what search terms to invest in, for instance, where on site should you be focusing your media plans. And I think we've always historically surfaced quite a lot of data there. I think where we need to make big shifts is within the evaluation space. So, as we move through that journey of media planning, how can we make sure we're sharing data at that stage and having that continuous optimization, which again is one of those big shifts that we've seen within market, is that, we see a lot of sophistication on how we, make quick changes, and we're making sure we're optimizing in flight. And I think that's something we are seeing a lot of as well.
Yeah, there's sort of several pieces to it, isn't there? There's that sort of surfacing of it for planning. Then there's the measurement, which is the actual sort of product sales, and then the attribution. So what's happening not just across your own site, but beyond that as well. And then also all the audience data. So where, who's buying, when are they buying, there's sort of there's several sort of chunks to the data piece, I think.
Yeah. And there's, audience is a big one for us because I think we have really powerful first party data, right? We capture every single purchase of all of our customers. We don't rely on loyalty cards, right? So we have a really rich set of first party data. And actually we need to make sure that we are housing that in a way in which delivers us flexibility in the future if we wanted to activate on those audiences. And we've already done elements of that, and we've taken a first step with a partnership with the Trade Desk that we've launched this year, which allows a advertiser to access Ocado audiences in their own Trade Desk seat. So it's integrated into their existing ad tech workflows. They don't need to speak to Ocado necessarily. And actually, we have created the right technology and ad tech flows to make sure that we are pushing those audiences in a privacy and secure way, to integrate those audiences into existing workflows, which is the essence of, self-serve when it comes to offsite. But you can only really achieve that by having the data in the right places and in the right format to be able to unlock that. So yeah, it all sort of ties together.
And just excuse my ignorance on it. So if you are advertising, if somebody's using your audiences and they're targeting those audiences, are they bringing that traffic back to Ocado, or are they advertising on third-party sites and non-Ocado sites, and then taking those audience away to potentially a competitor or their own brand site? How does that work in your world?
Yeah, so the current Trade Desk proposition we have, which is that self-serve ability to send advertising to Ocado audiences, is fully branded. So it's all linked to a given brand, and it will link through to a branded page
on Ocado's site.
No. So this will be branded. This will be branded content. So it'll go through to a brand's homepage that exists, right? So it doesn't directly link to us. And I think this is our first step in understanding the power of first-party data in targeting on offsite and in open web programmatic. And I think we really want to understand where the value is. That is it. It's our first step into this, but ultimately it's allowing advertisers the power to leverage our first-party audiences. Yeah,
and then capture that, for you to capture that brand spend effectively. Because traditionally, most brands work with a retailer, right? That's how they get to market. So I suppose if they're selling their own products on site, or it's a consumer, it's more of a brand spend. Presumably, that's what they're putting into your sort of audience offering. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I think that's right, and I think that's one of the big shifts that we talk to our supply partners a lot about. Is we talk about retail media, we talk about retail media networks, but the big shift that is being talked about, and we're starting to see this come to fruition, is the use of retail data within top of the funnel activation. So as the third party cookie deprecates and brands lose their ability to address audiences in an impactful way, we see the opportunity to use first party data to be able to do that. And I think that our key thing with all of this is it needs to be compliant, needs to be privacy and secure, and I think that's a really big important part of our ad tech flows to make sure that we're doing what's right for customers. But ultimately, this is looking to solve that challenge that brands have on addressability and the ability to target, and reach within that top of funnel activation that is going to become more and more challenging, right?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that for a second. So, how are you going to manage the cookie apocalypse? It seems to be a standard question on this podcast.
Just it. Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? And I think everyone's tackling it in different ways. I think for us, and the number one conversation we're sort of having with brands in this space is how can they create their own first part? How can they leverage our first party data to help, replace some of those use cases they used to have using cookie based targeting. And I think this opens up the broader world of data clean rooms and data collaboration, which is definitely front of mind for a lot of our more sophisticated brands about, how can they use our data, publishers' data, even their own first-party data and where do those use cases for data clean room technology exist. And that's a fascinating space that is still evolving very, very fast. And I think we'll see a lot of momentum. But yeah, for me, that clean room technology is going to sit across, three main use cases. There's the insights that a brand can glean from doing various matches. There's the activation, so the pushing of those audiences to various platforms, and then there's the measurement piece, which is big. So I think all three of those have their own merit. I think we are going to start very much from an insight perspective. So we've got great first-party data. How can we, in a secure way, be able to allow other first-party data holders to match that data and use the power of our first-party data to give them a better understanding of their data, and that's I think that will be quite a lot of use cases that we'll sort of work on in that space. But it's the obvious first place to start, really.
Yeah, and is that your marketing team that are driving the usage of data clean rooms because it's obviously required for the brand marketing, or is it coming from the retail media team because of the need to protect your audience extension?
Well, both, right? I think we both want to leverage that technology for different reasons, but also for the same style of use case, if that makes sense. So to your point, we have brand marketing teams that need to be using the likes of an InfoSum, for example, to be able to connect with various broadcaster publishers, and then we're thinking from our perspective is about what clean room technology should we be opening up for brands and insight partners so that they can answer their own use case questions. So I think we're approaching it from a very different use case perspective, but ultimately that's where we need to collaborate really, really closely. And I think that's one of the big surprises I've had actually over the last 12 to 18 months is, retail media can sometimes feel like its own entity and everyone needs to think about how we're going to maximize retail media and how are we going to deliver a great service to brands, but actually start to think about how connected it is to every single part of a retailer's business. So customer and marketing teams, data and insight teams, the trading and commercial teams as well. Like retail media it's a especially in our business, it's very much a category management lever as well, right? Because it's a way to boost visibility. So retail media needs its role and its own role within a retailer, and it'll be very different depending on what retailer that is. But that's where we start to see these connections, and I think
I'm fascinated about where that's starting to sit in an organization, because there's a huge amount of requirement for it from retail media, but actually the brand needs it as well, and the cost of it all is not insignificant. So actually, and then there's also the question of evolution around it. There's so much going on in the space that actually, is there suddenly going to be a much more cost-effective way of doing it before everyone's sort of ploughed in with huge sums of money? This whole thing's really accelerating it's going to really be interesting over the next few months.
For us, and I think that where we see the secret sauce, right, is how we can deliver advertiser value. So whether that's our suppliers, media agencies, non-endemics, like where is that value? Where is value for us as Ocado, as a retailer? It needs to work for us as well. And then finally the customer, and making sure whatever we do is not to the detriment of customer experience. And actually there's a sweet spot in the middle where you can make all three of those things work together. And the very best retail media networks or retail media propositions, or however you want to talk about it, it will be the ones that can really hit on all three of those things at the same time. And that's where actually we see how we're set up as Ocado being sizably different to our competition, because we're not a third party doing this on behalf of a retailer, right? We are a retailer first and foremost, and we will always think about customer when it comes to our retail media propositions. So for me, it's about making sure that retail media works for us as a broader organization, and that might be different than a Tesco, a Sainsbury's, or whoever else, right? And that's what we've done a lot of work on internally, which maybe the bit that people don't see as a supplier or an external party is we're trying to define what retail media means for us and how we can make it work, because it is such an important part of how we trade, given given the fact we're online only.
Yeah, and with an incredible amount of logged in data, right? Huge amounts of custody. So answer me that question then. So say I'm a brand coming to you and I'm saying, right, I've got Tesco over here and I've got Ocado over here. Why would I put more spend with you? Put you on the spot.
Yeah, it's the sales pitch, isn't it? Right, but no, I don't think this is actually. This gets to, again, this comes to the crux of how we're set up differently to perhaps how a dunnhumby or a Nectar would answer this question. Is that actually, yes, we could talk through the fact that we have a creative flexibility on display advertising and lots of opportunities to put featured products on site, and we could talk to all of that. But really, where I see the value for a brand and a supplier to be working with us is the fact that you can make that plan work in conjunction with your broader commercial plan, with your buyer and with your trading manager. And I think that sometimes gets lost a little bit when you have a third party managing and operating a retail media network, because no matter how much they are representing the retailer, they are always one step removed from the trading of the categories and one step removed from the customer. And that is a reality of how some of these RMNs are set up. And I think where we want to cut through is really, showcase to brands that you can create these retail media plans, and we have these fantastic placements and opportunities both on and off site. But for me, it's about how that can work in conjunction with your broader commercial plan, which should all be about how we're going to deliver mutual growth for each other. And that is a very different angle, perhaps, than what other RMNs will talk to.
Yeah, I'm totally in line with that. I mean, I know when we built everything at Thomas Cook, I always thought, often we get the question, oh, we should bring our media agency into the middle of this. And it was always so difficult because you were dealing with people who were brilliant media planners, but had absolutely no idea how the inside of a retailer works when it comes to those relationships that the product or commercial people have with the suppliers in order to sell product. And all the nuances that go around that. And actually, the closer you are to them and the ability to extend the marketing retail media campaigns off the back of that and extract the consumer budgets that are available on top of the trade, that's the art. It's not necessarily just saying we've got an ad network and here's some media planning.
And that's right. And I think what we want to do, right, is make sure we're not just another retail media network shouting about what capabilities we have. It's actually like, why would a brand want to work with us in a different way? And fundamentally, we're a different type of retailer, right? We've continually been a disruptor within the grocery retail space. 20 years ago, people weren't shopping online, and actually now we have 1 million active customers. We are a big player, but we are a very different retailer than perhaps one that is bricks and mortar and has those different channels to look into. And I think that's where we need to have those tailored conversations with brands to make sure that we're doing what's right for customers ultimately.
Yeah. So give us a quick overview of the media offering that Ocado have. You talked about coupons and on-site as well as the sort of trade desk audiences. Give us a view of what else is there, or give us in a nutshell.
Great, yeah. So I think our bread and butter is on-site, right? So primarily through featured products, so the ability to surface feature products at the top of search results, which is really important. A lot of our customers shop on search. It's a primary way they add to basket, so it's a really important growth lever for a brand. So we have featured products, we have display advertising that we have all over sites, whether that's homepage, whether that's search, whether that's browse. Lots of opportunities to talk about your brand through that advertising medium. We have stuff like coupons and checkout walk gifting as well. So lots of opportunities to give a real experience for customers. And I think, you can literally get your product in the hands of customers, which, we think is a really exciting sort of proposition. And then we have, something that we've built out over the last couple of years is our, what I would consider like Ocado owned offsite channels. So whether that's your ability to, get display advertising on email or paid social campaigns through the Ocado Meta accounts, or opportunities to advertise on Ocado Life, which is our magazine. So we've got all of these different sort of what we would consider offsite channels, that we can talk to our customers. And I think, the art is then how you can web your offsite and on-site plans together to create those truly omni-channel experiences. I think then where we're then starting to work and develop is then what does our true or non-Ocado owned offsite proposition look like, which is where our partnership with the trade desk comes in. It's where functionality with Meta and potentially connecting with brand accounts comes in. And also like future publisher deals that we might consider, right? And I think we need to be really choiceful in where we play in that space, but it's definitely something front of mind, which is how can we create a really compelling like offsite proposition that isn't Ocado owned. It's more sort of in the realm of where our customers are off Ocado.com.
Yeah, and create that integrated offering. And oftentimes more creative offering, especially when you've got that publisher network and paid social is obviously you're always limited by what you can do on site in terms of creativity, and e-commerce teams get very sensitive around disrupting the consumer journey. So the great thing about that, those sort of off-site channels, as well as the print magazine, for example, or things like that, is creativity, right?
Yeah, and I think I agree with that, and I think we've always historically offered actually quite a lot of flexibility on creativity on site, which is which I think our brand partners have always really valued, because I think it's definitely evidence within other UK grocers that there's quite a lot of limitations in how you can bring your brand to life on site. I think and I think just to fully answer that question on what our proposition is, we've actually done some work on opening up more on-site inventory as well. So we've just launched a branded cross-sell feature product, so your ability to surface a why not try feature product on some of your competitor branded search terms. That's a new placement for us to test this year, and then also thinking about new placements on our new page, so new to Ocado page, which is a place where our customers will seek inspiration on new products. And actually that's a really exciting place for our supplier and our suppliers and our brands to talk about NPD and really think about how you can boost consideration when customers are shopping on a grocer's website. So yeah, we're doing as much work as we can as well to think about how we can open up more on-site placements as well.
And how are you fulfilling it all, Jack? Are you doing it? Have you got a sort of big team in there now, or are you using agencies and managed service? How are you dealing with it?
Yeah, so look, and I think the way that we're set up at the moment is a lot of our media plans are governed and managed through the buying team. So they're part of a joint business plan, and they are, I guess, technically a managed service, right? But it's done through the buying team and the commercial team. I think where we're trying to work out is that balance of self-serve and managed service. And when you do managed service, where you are actually adding value to brands and supply, and where do they actually need that, not necessarily their hand being held, but where do they need consultancy and someone to really work on plans with them. So look, primarily it's managed through buyers, but we're starting to think about what does our future facing operating model look like to ultimately achieve those three things, like I said before, around Ocado value, supplier value, and making sure it's customer first. Like that's our guiding principle with it, really.
Yeah. Sometimes that becomes more acute when we start looking at the monetization of the long tail. So actually, how do you actually scale to hundreds or thousands of smaller suppliers with smaller budgets? Because certainly when you're bringing audience extension in, or just trying to scale many small campaigns across multiple channels, is how do you do that manually, or well, obviously you have technology, but how do you do that as a managed service? And often sort of big media agencies aren't geared up to do that at all, because they don't know how to scale thousands of tiny little campaigns. They're not interested in that and it's not really been their expertise. Whereas what we found drives it in our clients is that need to actually scale that piece, and actually that's quite specialist. How are you doing on that piece around the long tail? Are you still sort of servicing the big partners and trying to crack the nut of the smaller ones, or are they active?
No, we have Ocado has around 2,000 suppliers, right? So we are due to our operating model, we have the biggest range in the UK. We have 50,000 products, 2,000 suppliers. Like, it is enormous, right? So we have that challenge, right, whereby we do have a long tail, and I think we have done work to make sure that there are advertising options for that tail. So whether that's thinking about any self-serve technology that we can offer them. We also have really entry-level advertising channels, such as couponing, which has a really low cost to play. And it's something that's front of mind for us, is how can we create propositions that's right for a small supplier, but for me is around actually the role that these suppliers are actually playing for our customers, which is around our unbeatable choice that we have as a supplier, as a retailer. And I think what we need to do is create propositions that, yes, is right for quote unquote these smaller suppliers, but also is actually achieving our customer aim, which is to surface this extraordinary range that we have as a retailer, which is our competitive edge of why someone would shop with Ocado and not other UK grocers. So that is bringing to life a really, really great example of bringing to life about how a retail media network or retail media proposition needs to not just play a role in driving advertising spend for a retailer, but actually plays a role in achieving a customer outcome. And I think that's a really customer experience, exactly. So that's something we're always trying to understand.
Yeah, and the holy grail for retail media acceptance as well, which is within the business. So is the business supportive? Are you getting the support you need? I suppose you have to say yes, but how much persuasion are you having to do day to day?
You know what? It's a big question, because I think so. Yes, there is a lot of support, and I think when I think about what we're trying to do as a business, I think we need to have cross-functional, we need to have cross-functional endorsement and support on what we're doing, because it impacts everything, right? And like I was mentioning around, it is how we trade our categories at Ocado. It is what appears at the top of search results. So we have to do stuff in collaboration with the rest of the business. And I think what's been great over the last 12 months is there's real support top down on making sure that we create the right retail media proposition for Ocado. We are not looking to rinse and repeat what other grocers are doing in this space. We are looking to create something that is unique to Ocado and ultimately helps deliver customer first brand growth. So that is our North Star. And I feel like we've got a load of positive intent from leadership within the business, which is great. The reality is that they understand the opportunity that's there, because there's a lot of thought leadership that gets sent around the industry. But there's a reality, right, that a retailer is still a retailer, and it knows how to be a retailer. I think what a retail media network represents is the change in mindset for a retailer to wear a media business hat, which is a very different space for a retailer to be playing in. But where, again, just to reiterate the point, where we're going to be different in market is that we're trying to do that. We're not just siphoning that off to a third party to do it on our behalf. And that's where I see the real value. But yeah, totally got the endorsement. I think we need to go and make sure the plans are there to ultimately hit not just our objectives, but the broad company objectives as well.
Brilliant. I love it. And I'd really like to see how that journey evolves, Jack. I mean, often I say, please do come back at some point. But probably just because we've probably got about 2 minutes left, why don't you, I often ask this question as well, which is, where do you see the evolution of it over the next sort of couple of years? Where do you think this is all leading?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that's definitely going to happen, right? I think you will see the bigger retail media networks in the UK talk a lot around digitalization of the in-store. I think that's going to happen. We've seen a lot of development specifically from Tesco in this space. I could see the rest of the grocers following suit. So I think you're going to see a big movement there. I think you're going to see a lot more publisher deals within the UK as well. So you'll see especially the bigger RMNs that can have because of their scale, they can work with more publishers because of the match rates. So you'll see a lot more of those deals coming through, I imagine. And then I think you'll start to see, I don't know how this will play out, quite frankly, but you'll start to see this broader shift in asks of retailers to share and collaborate with first-party data. We mentioned those use cases of insights, activation, and measurement, and I think use cases will pop up across all three of those things. But what you will start to see is that really ramping up in my mind, because I think you'll start to see, actually, as we've spoken about, third-party cookie will go, and quite frankly, the sophistication of brands is going up. So I think we'll start to see the liberation of first-party data, really starting to take hold. But yeah, I think that's the key thing, right? And I think there's also a lot of unknowns. We don't know what's going to happen in the next few years, and I think that's where we, as a retail media business within Ocado, we need to keep outward-facing, keep talking to ad tech, other retail media networks, suppliers, brands, all of those types of stakeholders in the marketplace, so we can keep on the cutting edge of what those needs are going to be. Because, either I've been in, and leading this team for 12, 18 months, if I reflect on those 12, 18 months, the industry's changed, right? So we're going to have to keep thinking proactively about how we shape those plans.
Brilliant. Well, it'd be great to sort of talk to you again in 12 months or even earlier, hopefully. Jack, thank you so much for taking the time. So it just remains for me to say thank you for joining the Retail Media Moguls podcast. Please do come back. It'd be lovely to see how that journey's evolved. And it's really been really insightful to hear about the Ocado story and actually how you're differentiating from the others. And then also exciting to see, because you've got such an immense data background, how you bring that to the fore within the business. So good luck with it, and thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
The Retail Media Moguls podcast is brought to you by Platform 195. To learn more about Platform 195 and how to connect retail media with intelligent marketing to accelerate growth, visit platform195.com. And then make sure to search for Retail Media Moguls in Apple Podcasts, Spotify and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And on behalf of the team here at Platform 195, thanks for listening.